Holy snap. Alright, let's get this. Oh, I'm confused now. Let's get rid of this guy. He's annoying. Alright. Saturday morning time. Welcome back. First things first. Smoke 'em if you got 'em. Check out this cool lighter I got. It's like a fancy stoner peacock. It's pretty cool, huh? All right, today we're talking about DAWs, Digital Audio Workstations. Maybe you know what they are, maybe you don't. That's cool. But they're helpful for anybody that's doing work with audio. So that's like podcasts, music, if you're doing film or voiceover work, or even if you're making like Instagram stories and social media posts and stuff like that. DAWs are an important part of that sort of workflow. Important tool. So there's tons of them. They're all suited to different types of applications and different people. And what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you PreSonus Studio One, because that's the DAW that I use primarily. So we're going to go over what all the tools are and what they do in PreSonus Studio One. And then after that, I'm going to show you a whole bunch of different DAWs that you might choose, different price points. Some of them are very expensive. Some of them are full featured. Some of them are super simple. So we're gonna look at all the different DAWs and see which one you might want to use if you're just doing a podcast, and see which one you might want to use if you're just doing home videos. And we'll look at a bunch of them. So it's gonna be fun. Let's swap over to my desktop and make it happen, shall we? Swapping to my desktop. Here we go. Swapping to my desktop now. All right. Here's my beautiful desktop. Let's fire up PreSonus Studio One. Now, this is a multi-track digital audio workstation. So it allows me to work with... Remember last week and the week before we talked about some of those multi-track consoles and the tape machines? Well, this kind of came around and replace them conceptually, because we have computers now, so we don't need to use the tape to do it. So check this out. So here's Studio One. When you open it up, it gives you this little propaganda page, so they're trying to sell all their stuff over here. Studio One 5 has arrived, so there was a major update to this software just a couple of days ago that I did not, because I'm a professional, and I know that you don't install the major version 2 days before the demo. So I didn't install it. This is one version old. So you can see up here I have some options. I can create a new song or create a new project, which is a bunch of songs together like an album, or I could open an existing thing, right? And it shows me all my recent files and then breaks them out by which ones are songs and which ones are projects. And then I have a little artist profile here where I could put a picture of myself and all my SoundCloud information, and this integrates into SoundCloud. So if I were to record a song or something here, I could just hit a button and it would upload to my SoundCloud profile, and then I could share it out with all my friends and everybody could love it and go, yay, Luke. But I don't really do that much. So that's what this SoundCloud bit's about. Then we have setup here. So this is taking a look at our audio interfaces that are connected to the computer, so we can choose which one we want to use. You can see I have a bunch of them here. So this BenQ one is just my monitor. It has a mic and a speaker built into it, so I could use that as the interface for the software if I wanted to, but that would be a terrible idea, so I'm not gonna. This thing is one of my MIDI controllers, and then there's just the built-in stuff in my laptop here. Some other system audio drivers, but this is my actual audio interface. And if you're not familiar with audio interfaces and doing all this stuff, check out part 2 of this series where we went over cables and audio interfaces and routing and all that stuff, where we talk about this in detail. But for what you need to know as far as DAWs go is you have a bunch of choices here, all the stuff that's connected to your system, and you want to pick the one that you're going to use, right? So this is my best one. This is what I'm going to use. And then I can set some information here about the block size and some some settings to tweak the performance of these tracks. So the sample size, generally when I'm recording, I want to set this to something low. The reason that is because the lower the sample size, the faster you can hear back the signal. If we use a larger sample size here, it'll work. But it takes longer between the computer updating the sounds, right? So you hear a delay between the time you make a sound and the time you hear a sound. So usually what people do in this sort of a situation is when you're recording tracks, like if somebody were in here recording acoustic guitar tracks, we would set this as low as we could until we started to see problems with the computer, right? Until it started to fall over. So I would usually set this to something really low, like 32 if I'm recording people. And then after all the recording's done and we get into playing with effects and reverb and all that jazz, and then I would bump this up to something like 2048. And I would get better performance out of my computer doing that. So that's what this stuff is all about. And you can change the sample rate. Sometimes it depends on what interface you have installed, what options you're going to get here to control. So you can control the sample rate, but my particular audio interface controls this elsewhere. So right now it's locked here at 44.1. And then it shows you the latency, how long it takes the sound to get in and out of the system and all that jazz. And there's other preferences up here for connecting things like MIDI keyboards and little control surfaces like a hack, and just some general preferences. So that's the main page here. Let's just open up a new song and I'll show you kind of generally what a DAW. So we have some templates here, so it could create a few different bass blank template songs for us. If we were going to do a podcast, we could pick podcasts from here and it would set up a bunch of different tracks for different people for us automatically. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm an empty song, add all the tracks that we want individually. We'll be able to talk about the different track types and what they do. So here we can set some things for the project, right? Here's where I can set my sample rate. So the device is generally set to 44.1, but here I can override that to 48K. Now, there's probably only two of these you might consider using, and they're 44.1 and 48K. If you're doing audio music, 44.1 is the sample rate of the disc itself, so going beyond that doesn't buy you too much in the way of benefit. If you're doing video, DVD or Blu-ray or something like that, you can do 48, or some people go up to 96. I only use 44.1 and 44.8, so we'll set this to 48 kilohertz. Cool. Then you can think about this like kind of like the resolution in an image, like in Photoshop. So you could have a 16-bit resolution, right? This would give you 16 bits of information in each track. The information is amplitude and frequency information, right? That's kind of the data that's in that track. So the more resolution you have, the more data can fit in the track. And this becomes important to us as far as audio production goes, because at lower resolutions, you don't have as much headroom to push the volume. So you have to record things at a lower volume in order to fit them within the confines of the bit depth of the track, right? So if we set this to 24, then we have a little bit more headroom and we can record things a little bit louder. And if we record things too loud, we have some ability after the fact to turn it down without getting any sort of distortion or noise. And now the most recent technology is 32-bit. And if we set our track to 32-bit float, then we basically have effectively unlimited headroom. You can't really clip things at 32-bit float. So I'm going to use 32-bit float here. Not a problem, but a con, I guess, of doing this, setting it to a higher sample rate and resolution, is the file size going to be bigger, and your computer has to be a little bit faster to handle these things. But with modern computers today, that's generally not a problem. Now we can set our time base. It could be bars or seconds or samples or frames. Bars is generally where we want to be for type stuff. If you were doing a podcast, you might want to set this to seconds. It depends on what type of work we're doing. But for now, let's set it to bars. We can always change it later. You can set the default song length, which we can change later, and the tempo of the song. Now, the tempo of the song is set to beats per minute, and this is important to a lot of different functions of the software. So when we set the tempo of the song, we want this to be accurate to the tempo of the song. If we're doing a song, right? If you're doing voice, you don't have to worry about the tempo so much. But if we're doing a song, then the tempo is important. So we can leave this where it's at and change it later, or if you know the tempo that you want the song to be at, you can set it here. Same with the time signature and the key signature, and these are values. So if you're doing music stuff, this becomes important to you. If you're not doing music, you're just doing spoken word or video, then this isn't so important. So cool. Let's create our brand new song and take a look at what we get. It's a pretty blank interface. There's a whole bunch of little tabs and modules and markers and stuff. But what's up here is we have a track list. Right now we don't have any tracks, so we're not seeing anything in that list. And then we get an inspector, which shows us information about the track. Again, we don't have any tracks yet. Some settings here for the software and your preferences, how you want it to behave. Then we have the option to show the automation lanes. I'll go through these more when we have tracks. I have a marker track. So this marker track here, as the song or the piece moves through here, now we're playing, we can add markers and say this is a point where I need to add. So if I want to add a marker here, I can just hit this plus, and then I can right in here edit this part. All right, so we can put markers out when we jump between different sections of a production. And then there's some more types of tracks here. We have an arranger track, which I'll show you a little bit more in depth. That allows us to kind of, similarly to these markers, we can make sections out of our song and then move them around and rearrange stuff, and it's cool. We have a chord track. So when we do a musical piece, the chord track is able to extract the chords from our work, either if it's a guitar piece or a piano piece. The software can look at that piece that you played and determine what the chords are, and it will write them up here. So as you're doing your production and recording other stuff, you can see what the chords are for the song. It's very handy. Then we have a tempo track, which allows us to change the tempo of the song. Some songs call for that. If you're thinking about like progressive metal or some classical pieces, the tempo will change inside the song. It's not super, but it's here if you need to use it. And what else we got over here? And then we just have the add button. So let's add ourselves a track. And we get some options here. We get to name it. We'll name it Luke's Voice. And then there's some different types that we can set this track. An audio track, an instrument track, an automation track, or a folder. This is just going to be a recording of my voice, so that's just a plain audio track I'm talking into. On microphone, it's getting recorded, it's going through all the conversion and the cables and all that jazz, and it ends as a waveform. If I were to pick an instrument track, it would create another type of track here that I can't record my microphone into, but I could record my keyboard over here into, and it would record the MIDI and the data involved in that, and then we could process it with the computer later. And then automation and folder tracks are different things we'll talk about again later. So let's make a new audio track. I'll make a track here. We'll make it yellow because my vocal track's to be yellow. You know why? Because yellow is the color of my gold. My vocals are gold. Luke Gold Vokes. This is going to be a mono track. So the difference between a mono and a stereo track is a mono track is just one sound straight down the middle. A stereo track is two sounds coming out of each speaker separately. But my voice is just one source. It's getting recorded into one microphone. That means it's one mono thing. So we're going to use a mono source here. And then I'll hit bam. All right, cool. So now we get our track here in this list. Let's take a look at it. Make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so we get some buttons along the track itself. We can mute it. We can solo it. So if we have several tracks here and they're all playing, we could either take this one out by muting it, or we could listen to this one only by soloing it. Very important in a lot of different multi-track productions. So they put it right here, the first two buttons. Then we could arm it for recording. See, when I hit the arm button, now I have this little meter here that's showing the level of my voice as I speak, because this is the actual microphone I'm using. I'm using this mic. It's going through this input on my sound interface, and it's getting picked up by the software. And then we have a monitor button, and this button allows the software to route the audio through your speakers, which probably I would guess for most of us, we're probably not going to do this. I think most of us have an audio interface, and we're going to use the audio interface and plug our speakers into that. But if you're not using an audio interface, using your laptop, then you may want to have the software do all the monitoring for you. In that case, you could hit this, and it would play through your speakers as well as record. I'm not doing that because I'm already hearing the sound from my speakers because it's being sent to me before it ever gets to the computer through my audio interface. I hope that makes sense to you. So this is the monitor button. You can use this to listen back to the signal that's being played through the software. Now I have my inputs, so these are all different inputs that I could use to record stuff into my computer. I have a big, well, not super big, but relatively large audio interface with a bunch of inputs and outputs, and these are the ones that I use. I have named appropriately. So, and then down here we can set up groups and just organize a bunch of tracks together once we have a bunch of tracks. So let's just record something here. Let's look at the bottom here where I hit stop a couple times. It takes me back to the beginning. This down here where I'm waving my mouse is called the transport section. You see we can in the markers here that we've set up in this marker track, or we could just rewind and fast forward, and then we have stop, play, record, and loop. So let's just hit record and record voice here. This summer, the action sequence movie of the decade is coming. The trees have spoken. Maybe you remember M. Night Shyamalan's smash hit The Happening, in which Marky Mark played a science teacher that saved the world from angry trees. Well, it's back. And it's better than ever. 2021. So there we go. We have our movie trailer. See, it recorded exactly what I said. Here's the representation of the waveform as it recorded into the computer. Now you can see I've still got this track armed for record, right? And if I were to record again over it, check this out. Let's just record something else over it. I'd like you to Storytime with Luke, where each day we read a different story from the children's books archives of New Zealand's famous libraries. These books have been forgotten by history, and we intend to return them to their former glory. Tune in as we explore New Zealand's children's library books. Okay, so now we've just recorded right over the track, and if I try to move this, you can see my original track's kind of gone. That's a bummer. Let me see if I can expand my layers here. So check out what actually happened is it recorded the first track here. It's still there. It's not what we're looking at. We're looking at the new one I just did, but it kept the first track and made a new track here, and I can select which one of them I want to use. So this becomes super helpful for like music stuff. If you have somebody singing a passage, you can have them sing it in a loop over and over and over again. So let's do that for an example. Now, I'm showing you this in Studio One, but you can do this kind of thing in any DAW. So let's do this real quick. Actually, let's save this. We'll just keep this muted. We'll make it small. We'll hide those, and we'll make a new track. And we'll call it Luke Gold Vocals 2. Perfect. So we're going to arm that one for record, and then I'm going to drag up here. I'm going to set a loop area. So I'm just dragging up along this timeline. Say I want this many bars. Well, that's 7 bars, so we'll do all 8 bars. And then I'm going to turn the loop on here, right? 8 bars is long. Let's make it a shorter loop so we don't have to suffer. So let's do this. And let's hide this. Can I just hide that? Now, when I hit record, it's just going to record in a loop over and over these 4 bars. And I'll just, I'll say the same thing a few different times. So check this out. I like chicken wings 'cause they're tasty. I like chicken wings for my breakfast. I like chicken wings because I think they're delicious. I like chicken wings, you like chicken wings. Chicken wings are great, everybody sing chicken wings. Okay, cool. So now we have three slightly, well, not slightly, those are three very different versions of the thing. But what is cool now is I have these different takes, so we could listen to any one of them back. Let me just make sure I'm not going to blow your speakers. And let's pick the first one. Let's listen back. Lucky you. I like chicken wings 'cause they're tasty. I like chicken wings for my breakfast. All right, cool. Now let's listen to the second one. If I just select that area of the track. I like chicken wings because I think they're delicious. Right, and now the third one. I like chicken wings, you like chicken wings. You're hearing a buzz? Let me take a look here. Another minor thing. Every 45... let me take a look here at our comments. So, Lisa says, my camera is focusing on my face and the microphone's arm, so I'm a soft focus. That every 45 seconds to 3 minutes, the audio does a buzz sound. Matt Madden's also hearing it, so I'm going to guess that that buzz sound is by one of these sample things that I installed for this demo. So let me kill parallels for a second and see if that goes away. As far as the camera goes, after the break, I'll put it in manual focus so it stops doing that. But let's keep going with our thing here. So what I'm trying to show you is the take system here. So we've recorded in a loop these 3 takes. It just went and I sang my thing. And I just showed you playing back any one of these takes, right? So that's cool on its own, but in the purpose of music, we can mix and match. So let's say I want this word from this take, and then you did this part better here, and then I really liked the way that you hit the inflection on this bit. And now you see what happens in the top track is that it's pieced together from those takes, the bits that I chose, and I can come and change any bit at any time. So this is called comping, and be called something else in whatever DAW we're looking at. But in Studio One, we call it just comping with takes. So here we go. Let's listen to our comped track here. I like chicken wings because I think they're delicious. Buddies sing chicken wings. Pretty groovy, right? So the things that you can do when recording music in a DAW. That's groovy. So, one second, I've got a situation. So let's take a look at some of the other. Up at the top, we have our basic tools, right? So in Studio One, I have these 3 tools selected by default. This is kind of like a magic multi-tool, which is interesting. I really like the way it works. So if I make this a little bit bigger, and I move my cursor around this track, it does different things. So you can see if I hover at the top of the track, it turns into a little plus sign, and I move the cursor along the bars and do stuff like slice it into pieces, which is super helpful. I just double click here and it cuts the track, so now I can move this around, right? And then if I move my cursor down to the bottom part of the track, it turns into this little normal arrow cursor, and then I can use move things. But also, you notice at the top, now that I've sliced into its own piece, I get this little box up at the top. It's very small, but a volume control. I don't even know what you call this kind of thing, a boxy thing. This is a volume control slider, so I can now take this little slice piece and I can control the volume of this piece of audio by just sliding up and down. And then on the corners, it has built-in things, so I can, make that sound seamless. Also notice in a software like Studio One, if I take and slide it over and it can make a crossfade here by default, right? I don't have the default crossfades on, but if I hit the X key, it puts that fade in, and let me zoom in so you can see what that did. So you can see I've moved this piece of the track over this piece of the track, and it made this little crossfade, so one of them fades out while the other one fades in, and it makes it sound natural. Let's listen. I like, whoop, that was kind of, I like, and win. I'm not actually hearing it back, so I hope it's demonstrating what I want it to demonstrate. But yeah, this is a helpful thing when you're doing audio, especially in video production, because if you're doing sound effects and dialogue, you're probably going to have a lot of choppy little pieces of audio. Like, let's cut this up and move some stuff around. Imagine these are lines that people are saying, and in between the lines, we want to cut out all the noise, so we're not just listening to, the room noise. So imagine this is, well, it is dialogue. This is just dialogue. I was speaking here. So I'm cutting this up, Let's add another track. It says, let's imagine there's two people. So we add another track here, and I'll copy. This is somebody else's lines, right? So this is two people speaking now. I'm simulating it. Okay, cool. So now we have Luke's vocal, and I need an alter ego. What was L Money? L Money's vote. LMONEY box. And then let's turn this guy gold because lyrics are gold. My lyrics are gold. Cool. So now we have what looks like a more like a dialogue section in a film. So the handles become super helpful to us because we can go into each piece of this. Now, if we were to just play it back, you might hear little pops at each of these cut points because it's kind of an unnatural place to have sliced all these pieces of audio. Because now with all these little corner automation controls, we can just kind of fade the starts and ends in on each of these, and it makes for a much more natural sounding conversation. Although, I mean, having an actual conversation probably would have been more natural sounding than what we're doing here. Still, you get the point and why you might want to use this. So that's kind of these first three tools. Then we have a split tool. So you can either click on the little knifey thing or hit the 3 key. Notice if I hover over any of these, it shows me the key that I could press to get to them. And that's important in this kind of work because when people that do audio work spend a lot of time in their DAW. A lot of time, probably more time than any other application on the computer. Just we'll sit here for 12 hours and work on a thing. So it's really important to cut out as much of the repetitive stuff as humanly possible. And keyboard shortcuts allow us to do that. So learning the keyboard shortcuts for your software is very important for getting work done because it's very slow otherwise. So having the tooltips that show you the keyboard shortcuts is very helpful. So you learn the ones that you use over and over. So we can take this blade tool now, and instead of double-clicking now, I can just single-click. If I was chopping up like drums or something and you wanted to cut every like drum beat out, notice how this is snapping to this grid. You might not be able to see the grid too well, but notice that there's these faint lines kind of every so often. This is locked to our tempo and our beats per minute. So if we change that, you can see that those lines get closer together. I'm changing the tempo here by just kind of scrolling up and down on the tempo, and it makes everything go crazy because it's actually changing the scale of the song, right? So let's set that back 20. So all these little ticks here are quarter notes. And all these larger numbers are whole notes. Sorry, that's wrong. These dots are quarter notes. So 2, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, those 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, those are quarter notes, and then in between those we have the little ticks, and those are eighth notes. And you can change that grid here. Well, it's 16ths, so we can make it 30 seconds or whatever. And then we get more lines and dots and stuff. So the bars and the quantization stuff here, that's more important for people that are doing stuff with MIDI and drums a lot. So if you're trying to time correct drums and stuff, this becomes very important. You want to make sure that your stuff is snapped to the grid. It's in time with the grid. Because all the processing stuff after the recording takes that into account. Like a lot of reverb plugins will look at the beats per minute and it will calculate the length of the reverb tail based on the speed of the song. If you have the speed of the song wrong and you just ignore this, then you're going to get weird results just from other stuff within the DAW. So this is important. You want to set your tempo correct, and you want to get your stuff in time with it. But we were talking about this blade tool. I got caught up into the grid because the blade is slicing along it, right? And then we have an eraser tool. So if we have a bunch of pieces like all these little slices I made, I can take the eraser tool and get rid of ones. if I had played too many notes or we decide we don't need that little string part, you can get rid of it. Next, we have a paint tool, which allows us to paint all sorts of different stuff. Right now, it's just painting, I think, an empty piece of audio, so there's no sound here. But if I were in an automation lane or something, it would allow me to paint. Hold on. I'll go into these automation lanes later, but if I was here, it would allow me to paint different things. If I drop down on this little extra arrow, I can draw different types of waves, or I could hand draw lines this way, and this controls the volume in weird ways, right? So that's what the pencil tool does. It does a lot of stuff, but this is the main purpose for it, would be to draw your automation line. So let's say we want this word to be a little bit quieter. I don't like this freehand thing. Well, I guess freehand's the best I got. I want it to be a little bit more dotty, you know. I want it to add more points, but I'm sure it's configurable somewhere. This is what the pencil tool does. Now we have I think this is the mute tool. Yeah. So if I click this, it just mutes these audio pieces. We can say we don't want to hear that, and then let's just listen back to this monstrosity that we've created. I like because they're delicious, but it should make no sense. Cut it in a nonsensical way, but you can see kind of what the tools are doing. This is interesting. Now we have what's called an audio bend tool. So check this out. If I right click on one of these pieces of audio and then somewhere in one of these massive menus of tools, I can detect the transients. Now a transient in audio, let's zoom in a little bit here. The transients, this isn't super transient. Oh, there's one. There's a good one. No, that's a split point. These spikes, the bits that stick up over the rest of the song, these are called transients, and it's usually the sharp part of a sound that begins the sound. In speech, it would be like the plosive of a P. That P sound would create a transient, or a T sound would create a very strong transient, or a snare drum. And those transients can be detected by the software because they kind of follow a pattern. You can see where they jut up above the rest of the audio here. So let's right-click on one of these and detect them. It's in one of these things. Audio. Detect transients. Here we go. So I'm going to hit this. And what happened? Nothing happened. Where's our transients at? It's not detecting any. There's a there that lets me fix that more. Hold please. Not ripple, not snap, blah, 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 blah. It's a little drop-down menu-y thing like this. Ah, there it is. Here we go. I have to turn it on, I guess. Audio bend. So I got to turn on audio bend for the audio bend tool to work. Now we have the detection. We have a threshold. We can set some stuff here. Let's see what happens. Nothing happens. Is it broken? Let's just mess with some of these. It's slicing them. Interesting. Let's try a different piece of audio and see how this works. Or I have a better idea. Let's grab a drum loop. That'll be easier. So I'm going to just come in here. Studio One has all this stuff over here on the right hand corner. Comes with it. So there's all these loops and sounds and stuff that you can use to make music out of or to use as examples. It's pretty cool. So let's find some drums. We'll find some country drums. Listen to this. Let's see what that does here. So we got some drums. Let's try detecting the transients on this. There we go. Now we get a better result. So you can see it's found the beginning of each of the transients. So this is helpful too if you're doing like a bass guitar. It can find the beginning of every note. If you're doing an electric guitar, it can find the beginning of every chord. And then we can take this audio bend tool here and we can move them. Say this was out of time a little bit. Let me zoom in. Let's say this one's not quite. See how it's not quite on the line? I can just pull it back a little bit. Now it's on the line. I've corrected the time. which is nuts. I mean, you can go so far as to, now I can select this whole waveform here, and I can hit Q. Q stands for quantize, and it will automatically, oh, I'm lying, it's not doing what I expect it to do. Let me just right click here and go to quantize. Now it automatically relines all these transients with the grid that we're on. See how these little portions have turned red? That's saying that this piece of the audio has been squeezed. It squeezed it a little bit so that it fits in time. And now let's just go back to before we did that, and we'll listen to it, and then I'll quantize it, and we'll listen to it again. Okay. So this is before we even detected the transients. I'm just going to solo this track so it's the only one we hear. Okay. Now let's detect the transients again. We'll detect the transients, we get our lines, and then I'm going to right click again and quantize this. And you see it shifts everything a little bit so that it's a little bit more in time. Now let's listen to it again. Cool. So this function in Studio One, they're calling it audio bend. In Pro Tools, they call it beat detective, I think, because it's super helpful when you're doing drums and trying to get drums in time, because you can isolate all the kick drums and make sure that they are exactly in time. Or, you know, if you've ever worked with MIDI before, you've probably heard words like quantize and humanize, where quantization can take sounds and move them into time based on what we've set here on the tempo and lock them to the grid, and it can do it with perfection. The thing about perfection, though, in music especially, is we don't really love perfection. It sounds too perfect and it sounds not real. So after we quantize things, we came up with this idea of humanization, which adds a little bit of randomness back in. So you can quantize something so it's perfect, and then you can humanize it so it just shuffles things a little bit so that it's a little less robotic, and you can spend days or years doing that. The best, though, is to play your part in time the first time. Practice and get it right, and then you don't have to spend 6 hours trying to come in here and move each of your beats over. It's super handy that you can do it, don't get me wrong. It's fantastic that it can be done, but you don't want to do this by default, right? This is for fixing things. So that's what that tool is, and then we have a listen tool, which just allows me to come in and listen to any one of these little pieces on its own. It just starts listening where I click, which is kind of helpful. Now I have this little help thing, which is cool in Studio One. So it just adds a little, I don't know what you call this, menu bar. And as I hover over things, it shows me what I can do if I use modifier keys on my keyboard, which is really, really handy. So if I just grab the default tool here and hover over an audio form, you can see that if I hold Shift, I can draw a selection. So I can just draw a selection like that. If I hold the Command key, I'm going to get the range tool, and I can select a range like that where I'm not selecting the whole file, right? So I get different results when I use different keys and modifiers on the keyboard, and this kind of just helps you learn them and see what they are. I don't leave it on all the time because it's kind of jumpy and annoying, but when I'm trying to do something and looking for a faster way to do it, I'll flick this on and pick up a new shortcut. Let's check the comments. I hear some dinging. Dinging in the comments section, yeah. Comments section, yeah. Cool stuff. Thanks for tuning in, Ron. Good to see you. Appreciate that. Are you still hearing that buzz, Lisa, by the way? If you could let me know if turning off the virtual machine helped or not, that would be handy. All right, cool. So we've gone through most of this stuff. Now we have over here our audio bend stuff. So if I click this, I get some control over the audio bend. So I could tell it to, I can adjust this threshold and say I want more or less detection points. I want it to be a little less discerning about where the transients are. So you can adjust that some here, which is very handy. And you can show and hide the markers, which is also handy. So this tool up here gives me some extra stuff where I can control all that audio bending. Strip silence is kind of a similar thing. Instead of bending the audio, it just gets rid of silence in between the audio, which can be helpful. Especially if you're doing a podcast or a talking head-like interview where there's a lot of silence in between words and stuff. Very cool. Or if you're in between takes and you had a bunch of microphones, you're recording a band, you could cut off where the people weren't playing and get rid of a lot of noise in an automated kind of way. That's cool. Next, this Q is all that quantization stuff. So these are different musical values here, time values. So you've got your whole note, half note, quarter note, eighth note, 16th, 32nd, 64th, all that jazz. And as I change these, you can see I get different little, different granularity up here in my grid. So the more spots I have to put music, the more lines I get on my grid to snap music to. You know, you want this to be probably somewhere in eighths, 16ths, unless you're doing something crazy. But you can change all that, add triplets and dots and all that, and swing. So if you're not familiar with what swing is, it's kind of not a stutter, but generally when you play something straight, you're playing it on the beat. Bum, bam, bum, bam, bam, bam. When you play something with a swing, you can play it a little below or a little before or a little ahead of the beat, and it gives things a kind of a rush kind of a feel. So swing's used a lot in MIDI stuff and classical type music. And then you have different there's presets here that you can set if you like things a different way. So this is all quantization stuff, and then here we have some macros, which are for I don't want to say for power users, but you can automate different things here with macros and make buttons that didn't exist before. Like if you wanted a thing to automatically select this, detect the transients, and slice all the transients so that they were all their separate audio files, you could create a macro that would do that, and the button would go up here, and you could just hit that button, and it would do all those things for you, which is a big time saver. Input quantize here, this is doing quantization. If I were playing a keyboard part and I had this on, it would automatically quantize as I was playing. I don't like this because it makes things... I'm not a good enough keyboard player to play in time, and the computer is not good enough at fixing my time to make that sound musical. All right. So here's our quantize settings. So this is where we can, another place that we can set the grid information, and next to that we can set our time base. So you remember when we started the project, we set this to bars. We could change this to seconds, and you see that the numbers on this line change, and now they represent seconds as opposed to bars of music. And when we get to here, this is a minute, and we get to here, this is 2 minutes. Now if we change this back to bars, we're looking at this kind of in a more musical language. And we're looking at 1 bar, 4 bars, all the way up. You can change it to a couple other things, samples. I don't know why you would use this. Maybe if you were doing some scientific work. I would never use this for a musical or productive purpose. And frames, I think this is if you're working with video. So you want to sync up your video to the frame in the, you want to sync up your audio to the frame in the video. So this would lay it out by frames. So there's just different ways to cut up this grid so you can put music on it in time with something else in a standard way. It's very cool. Now we have some other tools over here. Toggle snap. Now you see if I have the snap enabled, let me zoom in on one of these things, and I start moving this waveform around, you can see it snaps on that grid. It's moving in steps, It's not very fluid. If I turn this off, though, now I can move this with more fluidity anywhere I want, in between bars if I wanted to. I could rush or slow down something if I were so inclined. So that gives you the ability to control it, and you can toggle it on and off as many times as you want throughout the production, so that's very handy. Next we have a thing called Ripple Edit. Now this came, I think, from video people, and this is really, really, really helpful for doing interview type stuff or podcast type stuff or editing dialogue. specifically. That's one great use I found for it. I mean, it's good for other stuff too, but dialogue specifically. So if we turn on Ripple Edit, and I select this little piece of audio and hit delete, notice how it just moves the other piece. So let's zoom in and do it on a, just so you can see it a little better. So if I just select that piece and then delete it, it moves the two pieces closer together, which is super handy if you're cutting out in dialogue somebody's and let's actually do this practically. So let's get rid of this track. I'll just record something and say a lot of ums in it, and then we'll clean it up so it sounds correct, but I'm gonna have to, how am I gonna hear it? We'll figure it out. Let me just get rid of this track. We'll delete this. We'll delete that. Remove track. We're gonna add one here, and I'm gonna record. Hi, this is Luke, and I'm just recording a thing. Oh, I had my loop, so that didn't go long. Let's extend this loop a little. Delete that. Turn the loop off. This is Luke, and I'm recording a thing. Oh, just a second, my dog's barking. No, that wasn't real. I just said that to put it in the recording as a practical example. Because I'm a smart guy like that. Alright, cool. So now we can come in here and let's just slice this up a little bit. So I'll grab my blade tool and we'll cut this and we'll cut that and we'll cut this. Bam, I'm just slicing it up. We could use one of the auto tools to do this, but this is just as quick, right? It's not very hard to do. And then, right, I'll just get rid of these pieces. I haven't deleted anything yet. I just sliced it into pieces. And now let me pop open this mixer here. I want to make sure I can hear this track back. All right, we're back. We should have these issues resolved. So fantastic. Now, if you remember before the break, we recorded this little monologue thing with a lot of ums and likes and stuff in it. And we went through and sliced all these little portions. Great. So now what I'm going to do is let's go through and clean this up so it sounds like an actual usable production. And we can see how fast and easily we could actually do this and make it somewhat convincing probably. Let's listen. This is, let's get rid of the This is cut right there. And then I'm just going to delete that. I'll use this multi-tool, delete it. We have the ripple edit on, so all the other stuff should shift over. Boom. Let's listen now. This is Luke. Let's get rid of this space. This is Luke, and I'm, let's get rid of this. We might have to come back and clean it up to make it all sound natural. Right now I'm just kind of getting the pieces in line. Get rid of this little space. This is Luke, and I'm, let's get rid of that I'm going to turn down Studio One a little bit so it's not so loud for you. You're getting the buzz, huh? I don't know where that's coming from. I'm sorry. I'll have to investigate later. I'm going to have to ignore it for now. Where were we? This is Luke, and I'm, get rid of that. Bam. Bam. This is Luke, and I'm recording a thing. Ooh, I don't need that, and I can get rid of this whole piece. This is Luke. I'm recording a thing. Oh, just a second, my dog's barking. Well, that was fake, and we're going to get rid of that. No, that wasn't real. I just said that to put it in the recording as a practical example. Because I'm a smart guy like that. Alright, so we're going to get rid of the, oh, my dog's gone. Oh, just a second, my dog's barking. Get rid of that. Get rid of this extra space. Get rid of all this extra space. Get rid of this. I'll get rid of this. Boom. Now let's hear what we got. This is Luke. I'm recording a thing. No, that wasn't real. I just said that to put it in the recording as a practical example. Because I'm a smart guy like that. No, we gotta get rid of this. Boom. This is Luke. I'm recording a thing. No, that wasn't real. I just said that to put it in the recording as a practical example. Because I'm a smart guy like that. Right? So you can see how easily you could clean something like that up. When I did that little intro thing for the Valleycast summer concert series, I didn't have a teleprompter or anything, so I had a little script that I wrote on my phone, and I would put it behind my back, and then I pulled it out, and I memorized one line, and I would record the line, and then I'd put it, and then I'd grab it and, learn the next line, record the line, and then I imported all that footage and audio into Final Cut and cut it just like this to clean up all those spaces where I was pulling out my phone and learning the line. So this works the same way. If you can do this in one of these DAWs, you're going to be able to figure it out in all of the other ones and the video software because they're all very, very similar. So the timeline sort of concept and slicing things and moving and quantizing and the grid, this is all very ubiquitous in these types of softwares. So if you invest the time and learn one of these really well, you're going to be 3/4 of the way there on all of the DAWs. And they call them NLEs, nonlinear editors. The video ones, that's like Premiere and Final Cut and Sony Vegas. They're all using these same kinds of ideas. All right. Groovy. So let's keep looking at what we got here in this DAW. Let's move on. So that was Ripple Edit. Now we have, this is auto scroll, so it just will, if I'm zoomed in here, it will scroll with me. Said that to put it in the, it scrolls the wave. If we turn off auto scroll, it'll just stay recording as a practical example. So that's kind of helpful. And then cursor follows edit position is just, notice when I click in here and now the cursor is following me. And before it wasn't real. Well, I guess it was. So I'm lying. Cursor follows edit position because I'm a smart guy. Like, I'm pretty sure if I click down here, the cursor doesn't follow me. I guess I don't know what that does. Let's real quick find out what this does because I am wrong. Cursor follows edit position. If you want the cursor to stay, turn it off. I want the main arrangement window to never move. How do I do this? If you want the cursor to stay still, turn it off. I guess that's what it means. So if we have the whole arrangement here, and we turn this on, and we click around, I don't understand what this does. So I don't know what this does. Then we have a scratch pad in Studio One, which is kind of like if you have an idea that you don't want to mess around with on your song, you can pull up kind of like a second timeline over here and move stuff. Be like, I don't know about this part. Let's move it over here for now. Right? So now we have a copy of it over here, and I could move it around here. Notice stuff still move. When I move these sections, the ripple edit keeps rippling. Ooh. I turned ripple edit off, I think. It should. I'm lying there again. I'm lying all over the place. Dun, 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 dun. I think ripple edit should move. Yeah, like so. But I guess only in certain situations. Inside the section, it moves. But if I move outside the section, it'll leave the gap. Interesting. We're learning today. Let's keep moving along. Let's keep moving right along. So that's the scratch pad. It's just a scratch pad for ideas and stuff and to copy things to. And then we have a little video player here. So if we were working on video and we were trying to sync it up with the audio, we could set our timeline to frames and we could load our video here and then we can make sure that our audio is in sync with the frames. So we would come up to our grid stuff where the cue is. And change this to frames. It's actually on frames right now. Let's change it back to bars, like civilized musicians. Actually, we're not doing music right now, so let's change it to seconds, like civilized broadcasters. Seconds. So now we're looking at our timeline in seconds. We can see that this is really only 8.5 seconds long. So we can move our end tag to there. It doesn't have to be so long. Let's just make our end tag here, 20 seconds. Now you have a 20-second project instead of a 5-minute project. Let's keep going though. All right, groovy. So that's the video thing. I don't use that much here. I would use Final Cut or Premiere if I was doing video. And then over here towards the right, there's a whole bunch of stuff Studio One includes. So we have instruments here. These are virtual instruments. So we can actually use a controller to play these instruments, or we could use our computer keyboard to play these instruments. But some of them came with Studio One, and some of them are purchased from third parties as their own independent packages. Let's look at some of the ones that come with Studio One real quick, because that's one of the defining things between DAWs. When we start looking at the different DAWs, is the plugins that they come with, right, and the instruments that they ship with. So Studio One has good ones. Let's take a look at some of them. Not all of them. We don't have time to go through all of them, but let's look at some of them. Impact is Studio One's kind of drum machine. So if I drag Impact over here, you can see it pulls up this instrument. And by default, it doesn't really do anything. There's no sounds loaded to these pads. But if we look up here in this drop-down menu, these are all different like drum kits. So loaded sounds on this. And you could also load all your own sounds and download them from the internet and put them on here. But let's just grab some of the pre-made kits here. Let's grab a classic garage kit and listen to some of these sounds. So you see it named them all on the pads, which is cool. And now if I click them, right, I can make these sounds. So this is the drum machine that comes with Studio One, and there's also synthesizers and a piano thing. So let's look at the synths. Let's grab Mojito is Studio One's. So we grab Mojito over here. Take a look at that, and this is just an oscillator and an amplifier and some effects. So I think I have to use my keyboard to play this. And then we can adjust these and change the pitch and make synthesized sounds. So this comes with Studio One, and it has also a bunch of different presets that change the sound very dramatically. So you can do all sorts of weird dance type music, techno type music. So Studio One in general is kind of geared towards that crowd that's doing EDM kind of music, but it also has really powerful basic recording stuff for audio recording, like rock bands. So that's why I like Studio One, because it does both of those things well. Some of the DAWs are suited more towards audio, some of them are suited more towards like electronic music, and some of them are suited more towards like live performance and DJs and stuff like that. They excuse me. They all kind of do all the same things, but they're all kind of gravitating to one niche. Studio One does kind of gravitate towards the electronic dance music kind of crowd, rap, hip-hop. But I love it. I love it. All right, so that's the synthesizer that comes with Studio One, and then we get Presence, which is like a piano. And we can pick different types of sounds in here. It's actually a sampler, so that it's not just pianos. We could pick a guitar sound. And let's grab a Les Paul sound and play it with my piano. All right, so this comes with Studio One, and all these sounds come with Studio One. And we can pick organs and strings and full-out concertos and basses, all that stuff. I should also note that when I say it comes with Studio One, there's different packages of Studio One. So there's a free version that you can install. It's called Studio One Prime, and it's limited on the things that you can do and the things that it comes with. When I'm talking about what comes with Studio One, I'm generally talking about what comes with the paid version, Studio One Professional. It's like, I think it's like $400 if you just buy it from the store, but if you buy it on Black Friday or like on any major bank holiday, it's half off. And they just came out with a new major version, so they're probably pushing it pretty hard right now. I don't know. But I'm talking about the professional version. This comes with the professional version. Probably not the free version. And what's the other thing in Studio One I wanted to show you? We did Presence, Mojito, we did Impact, and I think it's Mai Tai. Did we look at Mai Tai? Nope. Let's look at Mai Tai. My tie is kind of both. It's a it's a keyboard and a synthesizer. Let's take a look at. Let's play some pads here. The blade pad. In a world where trees are taking over everything, people are jumping off of buildings, and all we have is Marky Mark. Yeah, so you can do stuff like that. It's pretty cool. That comes with Studio One. So over here we have the instruments. These are just instruments that come with Studio One. These can make sounds that weren't there before. And then next to that we have effects. So effects are, a bunch of them also come with Studio One. You can see that there's some effects in here that come from other manufacturers that I've bought separately. These are called plugins, and plugins are a really important part of this whole ecosystem. So different DAWs come with their own stock plugins, and usually a full suite of them that allow you to do all the same stuff you could do with any other plugins, right? And then there are third-party plugins that you could interchange between these softwares. So these other plugins that I have that aren't from PreSonus, like these FabFilter ones, I can use these same plugins in all the other DAWs, which is pretty great. That's not always the case, though. I can't use the PreSonus ones in another DAW. And there's tons and tons of reputable plugin manufacturers. Now, the kind of interchangeable plugin format started out, I think it was VSTs, I think, were the first ones. They call them VSTs, and then you might see VSTIs. Those are VST instruments. That was a plugin platform, you know, kind of like MP3, or it is a standard that Steinberg came up with to write code that processed audio that was transferable and plug-inable, right? They made the VST. Steinberg's also the company that makes Cubase, and some of their engineers, some of their early Steinberg engineers left the company, and they're the ones that started PreSonus Studio One. Well, they started Studio One, and PreSonus bought it from them. So this has a lot of Cubase type influence, design influence, which you'll see when we look at Cubase. So let's take a look at some of these effects, right? We were looking at the effects. We have Ampire. Ampire is very cool. This is like Amplitude. So it's a guitar effects processor that models different types of guitar cabs. So we can play a guitar through here. Let's do it real quick. Let me just grab a guitar and I'll show you what this does. It comes with Studio One. It's crazy. We have the guitar. Dun, dun, dun. Now we need the cable. Yeah. Dun, 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 dun. We're looking for the cable. Dun, 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 dun. Those are my cables, not the cables. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. There's one. Found one. Groovy. All right. Bam! Alright, so now we have a guitar plugged in. It's not plugged into an amp or anything. It's just plugged into one of the inputs on my interface. So it should be pretty clean, right? Nice. Let's add this to a track. Right, let's get rid of this. Let's make a new track. Mute this one. Make a brand new track. We'll name it Guitar. I like my guitars to be blue. I just do. Cool. So now we have a guitar track. Now let's record a little piece. Let me set it to the right input. Right now it's set to the Great River, but my guitar is plugged in here to the Pacifica. Let's record it. tuning is for noobs. Notice that when I speak now, you're not seeing it get picked up in the recording because I'm not recording that mic to this track. I'm only recording the guitar to this track, so I can speak as much as I want, and that's not going to end up in the track that we record, which is pretty cool. Alright, now I was going to show you this amplifier thing. That's what we're doing. Let's not get distracted. Let's listen back to our guitar. Alright, groovy. Now let's throw amplifier on that and listen back. And I can change the amp. Right? I don't even have to own another amp. I can just use this software and replicate a lot of famous amps. And then you can buy new amps and amp packs and all that jazz. This comes with Studio One, so that's a important feature of it. I'm going to mute this track so you don't get blasted this time, because I'm a nice guy like that. Let's mute the Pacifica and yank it. Keep that muted. All right. I guess muting it didn't work. Now it's muted for good. Groovy. All right, so let's just cut this off here. Delete that a little bit. And then let's take a look. Let's keep looking at some of these plugins. All right, that's Amplifier and what it does. It comes with Studio One, and then we have analog delay, which we looked at in the last workshop when we talked about delay. So this just gives you some control over how quick you want the delay to be, how much feedback you want it to have, and if any modulation. So let's listen to our guitar track back with some of this delay. Let's turn the mix bit way down so there's not much. Let me turn it up. Right? So that just allows you to add delay to your sounds. It could be your voice, could be your guitar, whatever. We'll get more into using these tools as far as their practical purposes in, I don't know, the next few workshops. We're going to record a whole song, all the tracks, and then we're going to edit it, and then we're going to mix it, and then we're going to master it. So we'll learn about how you would actually use these things in a production a little bit later. We have some other stuff in here that I don't use much. I'm not going to go through all of these, but we got delays. We have a channel strip. This channel strip gives us just the basic functions that we might expect on one of the old consoles. So we have low-cut EQ filter here, and then we have compression that we can just dial in with a single knob, which is kind of nice and easy, you know. Then there's a little expander, which is, we didn't talk about expansion, but it's the opposite of compression. So if you think of compression as turning the high bits down, expansion is the opposite, turning the low bits up. It's really the same thing, but in a different way. It has a different effect, a different sound. So you can do both of them, and you can do both of them at the same time with something like this. And then you have your EQ section over here. So this is kind of, if you're doing a simple song, this might be all the tools you need. And then we have choruses. The normal compressor that comes with Studio One looks like this. It's kind of nice. Let's play with it a little bit. Let's go back to, actually, let's put it on that voice track and play with it, because it'll be a little bit more apparent how it works. Let's mute our guitar. Let's go back to our voice, and let's throw the compressor on it. And let's just leave it at the defaults and see what happens. Actually, let's look at the defaults first. First, we have a ratio of 2:1. That means for every bit of sound that crosses the threshold we set here, it's only going to go up by a ratio of 2:1. So it's going to take 2 decibels to turn it up by 1 decibel. That's effectively turning it down. That's how a compressor works. So let's see what that's doing. This is Luke. I'm recording a thing. No, that wasn't. You can see here's the threshold, and you can see where it crosses it, and then this little meter here is showing you how much the signal is being turned down. So we'll just watch this little meter, and you can see when it crosses the threshold, the loud bits of my voice that get turned down. This is Luke. I'm recording a thing. No, that wasn't real. I just said that to put it in the recording as a practical example. Right? So this is the compressor that comes with Studio One, and I want to draw your attention to one more thing. If we look down here in the track, it's track 2. Thing. No, that wasn't real. In the mixer window, if you look, it's very small, but next to the 0 and next to this fader, there's a little compression gauge. So it shows you on the channel itself how much of the signal is being compressed, and that's really nice to be able to see, especially when you have 100 tracks. Said that to put it in the recording as a practical example. So you can see the little smart guy like that. Gain meter here. And further, I can expand this in Studio One, and they've given us this nice little display of the compressor. You know, and that doesn't work with all the other third-party plugins. It only works with the PreSonus plugins. So that's a cool thing about Studio One and its plugins. No, that wasn't real. On your track. I just said that to put it in the recording. It's neat. As a practical example. Because that's the compressor, and then they have what's called their FAT channel. So they're trying to get into emulation of hardware. These are kind of channel strips that have character of the old analog gear, so you can simulate tubes here. This looks like, actually, this is a compressor. This looks like an LA2A emulation, and then you could change that to FET. This looks like an 1176, so these are compressors. And then there's also stages here. So here's an equalizer, and we can change that. So we could have this, a passive one. It looks like a Pultec. So it's very cool how they did this. These are all the same pieces of analog gear that we discussed in the last couple of workshops. This looks like a Pultec, and then you have one of these vintage ones. I'm not sure what this is. This might be another Pultec type thing. And then we got one of these guys, parametric, and then another one of those. So, and then a limiter as well. There's a limiting stage. So that's what the FAT channel is. It's pretty cool. That comes with Studio One. We got some more delay type things, and then let's take a look at the reverb, because everybody loves reverb. Reverb's our favorite. Right. Studio One comes with a couple of reverbs. The first one's called room reverb. So let's pull room reverb onto our guitar. And you can see it gives us a sort of a representation of the room that we're emulating. Because what reverb is taking the sound of a room and, well, reverb is the sound of a room. But when we talk about using reverb, we're taking the sound of a room and applying it to our dry source, or the source that we recorded that wasn't picking up the natural sound of the room around it. We're artificially adding reverb to a source that didn't have it. And this tool helps us to do it. So you can see as I change the size, it changes a few different things on the display. It's showing us the size of the room, obviously, and the width of the room, which is going to have a characteristic on the sound it makes when there's a lot of reverb. And it's showing us the reflections, the early reflections. So if you don't understand how this works and what this means, check out our reverb and delay workshop that was last week. That's on the YouTube channel, and it's on the Facebook channel. And we go over these and how reverb works and why you would use it and all that jazz. So this is one of the reverbs that comes with Studio One, and then Studio One also comes with a convolution reverb. So if you remember those, does it come with convolution reverb? I'm pretty sure it does. Oh, before we get to that, let's take a look at this one. This is an important one. This is the built-in EQ, PreSonus Pro EQ. So if you've seen the other workshops, I use the Fab Filter one most of the time, so you might be familiar with that look. But this is kind of the same thing. It doesn't have all those nifty features. It's not quite as cool looking, but it works in the same way. It does the same stuff, right? And it gives us a couple different ways to control it. We can control it either by clicking around, or we can control it by moving these knobs if you feel more comfortable moving the knobs. But this is one that gets used a lot, and it's a really good EQ, right? There's nothing wrong with this EQ at all. I like the Fab Filter one better, so that's the one that I use. But this, sound-wise, is fine, right? It's very good. And then here it is, the convolution reverb. So when we talked about reverb the other day, we mentioned convolution reverb. It's when people will take in what's called an impulse response of a room. So they'll actually record the sound of the room. They'll take a reference microphone, a purpose-built microphone, and put it up in a room, and then they play a sound, a controlled sound, and they record how long it takes to come back to the microphone from all the different points. And then they can put that into a computer and then later replicate the sound of that room. That's what convolution reverb is and how it works. So you can see here when we open up this open air reverb, nothing happens. There's no impulse response loaded into it by default, so there's nothing to apply. But if we look in here, in the presets, you can see that there's some impulse responses that come with it by default. So we've got an ambient hall. So PreSonus recorded or paid somebody to record the sound of a big, long ambient hall, and this is what it sounds like. I'm a smart guy like that. Well, no, this isn't what it sounds like because I got a shite ton of other effects on here. Let's get rid of some of these. Let's get rid of all of these. Can I just clear it? Remove all. Boom. Let's grab our open air, throw that on our guitar, and then we're going to grab that hall because I like the sound of a hall. And let's listen into what that sounds like. See, we've got our mix knob here, and this is what I'm going to control it with for now. I wouldn't recommend using reverb like this in general, but we're going to go over that more when we mix. Let's listen to just that guitar with our reverb. Let's change some of them. Let's put it in. Let's try a plate. So it's a natural sounding reverb. It doesn't sound very digital at all. It doesn't sound as clean and as polished it doesn't sound as money as a modern reverb that you might hear on a pop song, but it sounds much more realistic. So this might be a good choice for like a bluegrass band or somebody that's purist for sound. Classical symphony may choose to use impulse response of an actual concert hall like Symphony Hall as opposed to using like some kind of fake digital reverb. Not that digital reverb isn't great, because it is. Just saying. So these are some of the effects that come with Studio One. Then we get loops. So these are just preset loops in different styles that are kind of cool to play with. We can grab a folk bass loop, for example. Let's see what that sounds like. Cool. So I wasn't playing that loop. That's just a pre-recorded little loop of sound, and I can just grab this loop now if we want it and drag it into the timeline, and there we go. There's our sound. And then I can duplicate it and loop it as many times as I want, and I can move it around, and I can mix and match it with the other loops. And you can create whole songs that way if you want to, or at least background music for productions, for your videos and stuff. There's definitely enough sounds in here to make a lot of different styles of music. Then we have the files section, which allows me to browse my actual hard drives and stuff. I can see all my connected disks where I have loops and sounds and recordings and stuff. Cloud stuff, so they have their own like store, and I can log in and buy stuff from them, different plugins and sound sets and all sorts of stuff. And SoundCloud, so you can go in here and browse what you have in your SoundCloud profile and manage all that stuff here. It's kind of neat. You got their store, and then the pool. So the pool here is just showing me all the actual audio events that we've recorded, including all the different takes when we were playing with takes. So this is the actual WAV files where they exist on my disk. So if I right-click on here, I can locate that file, or I could open it up in the disk here, and you can see it actually saved to a WAV file right here on my hard drive. And I could send that to somebody if I was working on a project with somebody remotely, or I could just, maybe I hid the track and I couldn't find it, and where was that? It's going to be in the pool. So that's pretty cool. And then let's talk about the bottom here, and then we'll be done with Studio One for now, and we'll talk about some cool stuff in the other DAWs and why you might want to use those. So down at the bottom here, you can see some settings about our song, how much this is showing us our sample rate and the performance of the computer and the MIDI performance. So as my CPU spikes, if I was doing a bunch of stuff, I'd see this performance meter rise. As I add tons and tons of plugins and hundreds of tracks, it's going to be taxing on my computer, and this gives me a gauge to see where that's at. It shows me MIDI here, so it's showing me if I'm doing stuff right now. You can see when I touch the key on my keyboard, it lights up the little orange thing on the left. And then I have a little, I think this is a performance gauge thingy, cache activity, blah, 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 blah. We can see how much time we have left to record on our disk if we were running out of disk space, but it looks like we're good. We got 43 days. I'm not going to go on for 43 days, but this is a lot of time. And then we can see a couple different time bases here. We can see in seconds and bars. Let's say we set this to frames. Now we could look at all three at the same time if we were so inclined. Then we have our transport. That's just fast forward, stop, play, record, loop. Left and right stuff. I don't really... Loop length? Oh, this is showing us the start and end point of the loop that we have set up here. And then we have some buttons, and these buttons are kind of small and hidden and important. So we have record mode replace. We saw when I did that loop and we recorded the same thing over and over and over again, it made takes. Well, sometimes you might just be trying to get it right? You don't want all the takes. You just are playing the same piece until you perform it correctly. So if that's what you're doing, then you might want to turn this on, and instead of making all those takes, it'll just record over itself and record over itself until you stop it. Then we have a whole nother panel. We can pull this up and we can, set the record mode here too. And we can set our input quantize here. So it's the same stuff we talked about up here, just in a different menu. And you can set it separately for record mode, which is recording audio like a guitar or something, and an instrument loop record, like if we were recording a MIDI piece with a piano. Then there's some note repeat stuff, and this is kind of cool for playing with MIDI. But we'll talk about MIDI as a whole separate thing. The couple of things I wanted to draw your attention to down here are this pre-roll. So if we turn on the pre-roll and I hit record, it gives you a little pre-roll to get ready to record. So let's hit record. Am I lying? We turned on pre-roll. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm talking about pre-count. We turn on pre-count and I hit go. Right, it gives me that little count in. Now, if I turn on auto punch, check this out. So, if I set a loop part, like here, let's make our loop this little part right there. And then let's hit record, and I'll change it to the Great River because I'm speaking through that. And then I'll hit record. Right, let's turn them both on. I want the can I have them both? I can't have them both on. But here we go. So I'm going to hit record and see what happens. Now I'm speaking. We're not hearing anything but the guitar. Well, you're hearing my voice, but I'm not recording it until we get to our loop point. Now it's punched in at this point, and I'm recording over there. And now the loop's over, so it went back to the guitar. So let's listen to what we have now. Until we get to our loop point. Now it's punched in at this point, and I'm... Okay, so that's super helpful for guitar players, especially if you're playing a piece and you need to replace a chord. You can come in here super surgically, find the place where you need to punch in the new chord, and you can set your loop there. So let's say I need to just replace this. Well, in this case, it's going to be word, so a singer could do it too. So we'll say I just need to replace this piece. And then we set the punch in, right? And you can have them... if we start playback right here, you can have them sing along with the whole vocal track and just take the new piece. So that's what punching in is good for, and it's super handy in recording audio. And then we have our metronome. And the metronome's important if you're trying to stay in time, and that's just click, 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 click. And it's going to change based on the tempo of the song, right? Until we get to our loop point. Now it's punched in at this point. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we have control of that here. We can change it to 3/4, so it'd be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, which is important in music. And it's different. It might not sound different to you if you're not used to music, but it's different. It matters. If you're recording video and dialogue, it doesn't matter so much. But if you're recording music, this matters. and then we have our tempo control here. So I can double click here and type in a new tempo and it changes the tempo, or I can just kind of click with my mouse and drag up and down and that changes the tempo. You see, it's not changing the waveform at all. It's just changing the grid around the waveform. I'll set it back to 120. Right, and then we have some buttons over here. So right now we're looking at the mix window here, so you can see all these different tracks, and I can control each one of them, and we can mix them together. But there's also an edit window. So if we hit edit, now I have kind of a better look at this audio itself, so we can come in here and do a better job of cleaning up some of these spots here. Like, let's pull this back here. Yeah, you can see, there we go. We kind of fix that up a little bit, and then we can come in here and we can select this bit and say, let's right click on that. See some of the stuff we can do in here. It's not all in the right click menu. I'll just grab this and we'll cut this. Snip, snip. Same thing I was doing up here, but I have a little bit more control over it in this view. Right, and then I can grab that little snippy bit here and we can turn that word up a little. Right, so that's pretty cool. That's the edit view, and this looks different if we're looking at a MIDI piece. So let's take a look at a MIDI piece real quick. If I add an instrument track here and then double click in there, I get a MIDI roll. So this is different. So if you're doing programming or drum programming or piano programming, we can come in here and click this, and there's no instrument on this track. Let's put an instrument on this track. Let's grab instruments. We'll grab Mai Tai, throw it on there, and we'll grab a sound. We'll grab the bass, an 80s funk bass. See what that sounds like. Cool. Now, that's on our track. So when I come in here on this piano roll here on the in the edit window and click these, I can hear the notes, right? And I can start drawing them in. Right. Whoop. And you can start writing a song or a piece, a bass piece in this edit view, and then we can switch back to the mixer and mix it in. Right? And you'll also see that those notes that we added here in the MIDI roll are showing up now, and if we hit play, it's going to play something very unmusical sounding. Right? So it's allowing us to mix these types of sources together, which is fantastic, and some DAWs are better at this than others. So we're getting to 11:45, I think. I think we should take one more break, and then when we come back, we're going to stop with Studio One. I'm going to go through a few of the different popular DAWs and explain why you might use one over the other. And I want to show you one super cool trick in Adobe Audition for people that work with film, because it can save a lot of time and it's very, very cool. So let's break, and we'll come back in 15 and get her done. All right, here we go. We're back. We're going to switch gears here for a little while, and we're going to talk about some of the other DAWs. So we were just taking a look at Studio One, the DAW that I use primarily. There's a lot of other choices for a lot of other budgets. And first off, I'm sure you've all heard of Pro Tools, because Pro Tools is the industry standard DAW. It's been around for a long time. Everybody's heard of Pro Tools. I don't use it. I don't particularly like it. But my buddy Sean uses it a lot, and I asked him to prepare a little video for us that will give us some pros and cons to Pro Tools and maybe help you understand it commands, the respect that it commands, and also the price tag. So let's hear from Sean for a minute, and we'll be back, and I'll take you through some of the other DAWs. Here we go.
What's up, guys? Sean here from Shooty School. We're going to talk about Pro Tools just for a couple minutes. Avid bought Pro Tools from DigiDesign quite a few years ago, and Avid basically dominated the video post-production industry for a long time until Final Cut got popular, and now it seems like Premiere Pro is the choice nowadays. But you have a very reputable company that bought Pro Tools, and that's a good and a bad thing. And I mean, it's a good thing because now you got more muscle and more money behind it, but now you also got to pay a lot more money for it as well. So if you're considering to pick up Pro Tools, I would ask myself, a couple questions. One, do you have money? If the answer is yes, then rent Pro Tools for a month, check it out, decide if you like it. If you do, then commit, because I pay about $200 a year for Pro Tools. I mean, over 5 years, that's $1,000. That's $1,000 I'm paying for this. With that in mind, I would ask you a second question. I would ask you, are you making money in audio production? If the answer is yes, that's another reason to consider Pro Tools. Definitely not a selling point, but another reason to consider it. And the third question I would ask you is, are you working professionally in audio for video post-production, or do you intend that to be your career? If the answer is yes, then at that point is where I would start telling you you should check out Pro Tools, because there are a ton of other DAWs out there that are going to help you do fun, creative stuff that don't remotely cost as much. Also have a lot more user-friendly features. But Pro Tools has covered the majority of productions that exist, and that's why it's reputable. That's why it's still the industry standard, not for you writing your song to release, but more specifically to post-production sound mixing for film. And by film, I don't mean, your YouTube movie that you shot with a camera or two and a sound guy that had a microphone or two. That's not the workflow I'm talking about. I'm talking about like Game of Thrones, for example. Game of Thrones, you have multiple sound mixers. You have multiple field recorders that are recording up to 10 plus tracks at a time. Every time they do a take, you're recording up to 20 audio tracks for a single take. Now you do that 50,000 times over the course of a full series of Game of Thrones. Now you have a serious audio workflow to deal with. Most specifically with timecode, I've synced and mixed a couple films at this point in my career where Pro Tools is really hitting runs compared to workflows I would have to do in other DAWs. And like I said, I'm not recommending it unless we're at this point. Pro Tools also, so I'm spending $200 a year on Pro Tools. One thing about the Pro Tools $200 price tag is $100 of that, which I think used to be optional. I don't know if it is anymore, but $100 of that is customer support. So you're not emailing someone or going to a forum. You pay for support, which is included in the price tag, and you get a human being on the phone. And I've only had to do it once or twice, and it for reasons for Pro Tools bugs, not even to my ignorance. But if you're a newbie or if you're not used to Pro Tools, I mean, that is a lot of value in that phone customer support. I mean, it works well, and you get on the phone with people. So that's one thing that's awesome about the $200 price tag. As with most DAWs, you get a bunch of free plugins. I'm not using these too much, but this is probably an example right here of what comes with Pro Tools along with the $200 a year package. Pro Tools also has the, I think it's called the DV toolkit or toolbox or something like that. And that's where it really gets crazy. And of course, you spend more money for it because when you're a professional location sound mixer, like the guy that's recording the microphones on movie sets, there's a lot of notes and stuff that happens per take. For example, this is a wild line, meaning this doesn't sync to any video. I mean, that audio file will be lost forever without notes being written into the metadata. And a lot of these programs are not going to read this metadata. A lot of the video editing programs don't even read the metadata. So there's an example of where Pro Tools is going to just save the entire production, because you're going to know and see all that metadata from the notes that your field recorders, your location sound mixer is taking note of. I mean, that stuff's important, and timecode is crazy. It's complicated. As simple of an idea it is, it's very complicated in post because it needs to marry with video perfectly down to the millisecond. Pro Tools can really organize. Imagine 50,000 takes, the average of 10 audio tracks per take. You do the math. One project with that many source audio files, never mind the audio files that you create when you're working. So I would say if you're in the professional audio realm, professional audio for video realm, Pro Tools is a home run. But if you're not making money, don't do it. Start somewhere else first, unless you got a gig that demands it. I guess a last note from a compatibility standpoint with Pro Tools would be Mac PC is interchangeable now, unlike some software. It's you can open Mac file in PC and vice versa. You can open old Pro Tools file in a new Pro Tools file, and you also have a special way to save new Pro Tools files, so they open with old Pro Tools files. So there's compatibility for you. Never mind the cloud sessions that they now offer, which I'm sure comes with an extra price tag. I have no experience with that, but you can imagine someone like myself on the East Coast working on a project, hitting save, so a guy on the West Coast taps a button and it opens right back up. I mean, that sounds like some crazy convenience. So I'm sure Luke will tell you all about the options besides Pro Tools. I could name 10 of them off the top of my head that are cheaper and fully capable of doing a ton of professional, awesome stuff. But if you're pushing for a pro audio in video career, you should consider it. Or if you got the cash, blow some cash and check it out. So that's it. This is Sean from Shooty School. Rock on.
All right. Thanks to my buddy Sean for recording that for us and explaining the benefits and the justification of the price of Pro Tools and why you might choose to use Pro Tools over one of the other DAWs. Now, it's important to note, Pro Tools is not the greatest at doing MIDI stuff. So if you're doing kind of dance music, electronic music production, Pro Tools isn't really the greatest option for that. It's great for things like movies, like Sean described. Let's look at some of the other DAWs that you might be familiar with. Like one of the main ones that you might already have for the Apple people out there is GarageBand. Let's take a little look at GarageBand and see what it's about. I'm sure you've heard of it. People use it for all sorts of stuff. It's pretty powerful. It's not bad, and you can get a lot done with it. So let's take a little look where to go. All right. So we open up GarageBand. It wants to talk to my stuff, so we'll let it, and let's open up a new project here. All right, Lisa wants GarageBand. I don't blame you, it's pretty cool. So check it out. When we start a new project, we have a couple of different options. We can use a software instrument like a keyboard or something like that. We could do audio. I can record my mic or a guitar. And then there's this other one here, which is really cool. It's called Drummer. So let's pick Drummer, just because I want to show it off real quick. If we pick Drummer, note that it makes a drum loop for us, and let's hit play. That's pretty cool, right? And you can see down here at the bottom, there's different presets and types of drummers, and you can change kind of pretty easily whether he's playing loud or he's playing softer or he's playing something that's really simple or really complex. And notice as I move around in this gauge, it's changing the actual audio up here that the drummer's playing. This is insane. Right? So you can just have this thing make your drum part for you, and you can record a whole song this way. I like that you just have a little dial here, so you can tell the drummer to shut up a little bit. You could be like, stop it with the fills, drummer man, and then he'll do less of that. This is very cool. This is really, really cool. And you can, over here in the left-hand library here, you can change the characteristics of the drummer itself. I would have to download some stuff here, so I'm not going to do it. But these different drummers have different playing styles, and they have different drum sets and different sounds, and that's very, very, very cool. So you can start with your drummer, and then we can right-click over here, and we can add a new track, just like in Studio One, and then we can set that to an audio track, and we can arm it for recording somewheres. I'm not that familiar with Studio One. There's mute, there's solo, monitoring. Where do I set the input of it? Whoop, I think I saw it. Here we go, record setting. So it's using my MacBook Pro's microphone right now. It's not using my interface because everything else is. So here we could set our input. We could say use my MacBook Pro microphone, and let's see if we can just record with it. What happens? Hey, this should be recording me through my MacBook microphone, but I don't, because I don't see any audio. Well, you know, if we've got this all figured, for the demo, I'm not going to go through it, but you can add your audio to this, you can add your bass, and you can go through and do a lot of cool things, like add those loops and stuff, and GarageBand comes installed if you buy an Apple PC or a phone or an iPad, and it has mostly the same functionality across all the platforms, which is even crazier. So this is a very good option for a lot of people. But its biggest drawback, well, it's got two drawbacks. It's not anywhere near as powerful as the other DAWs when it comes to like editing and stuff. It is powerful. It's very powerful, but it's not the same thing. Okay, this is for people to make music real quick, and it's getting better every year, and it's getting stronger every year. But Apple themselves make a more full-featured DAW called Logic, and they kind of draw a line where this is a fun tool to make music with, and then this is an audio production workshop, right? So they borrow technologies from Logic and put them in GarageBand and vice versa, and that makes the Apple ecosystem very strong. So this is GarageBand. Let's take a quick look at Logic so you can see if you like this kind of interface, if you like the Apple way, the Apple mindset, then you might like Logic if you're an Apple person. So let's take a look at Logic, which is like GarageBand on steroids. So let's fire that up. Ooh. Now, these apps, some of them, GarageBand's free with the Apple stuff, but Logic is like $200 or $300. A lot of these are not inexpensive apps. I'm going to go over some that are inexpensive, that are pretty full-featured, but Logic is fairly expensive. Go ahead. Stop asking. It's not letting me click on stuff. Come on, Logic. Talking about how easy and great Apple stuff is, and then it doesn't let me click on the stuff. Did it crash or did it work? I don't know. You never can tell. I'm thinking it crashed. It's still running there, but let's kill it. Let's quit. No, let's fire it up again. Jick. Here we go. Okay. Connect. All right. So you can see already this looks really, really similar to GarageBand, which makes perfect sense because it's made by the same people. So a new project here. And it's asking me what I want to use as a virtual instrument, I guess. Say new, file, new. Close this project. I don't know what it's asking me. What is happening? All right. Empty project. There we go. It just opened it up over there. So it's asking me what kind of tracks I want to do. So let's just add some audio tracks here, and we'll close this window. Cool. So now we're in Logic, and it looks a bit different from GarageBand now. It looks more like Studio One because it's kind of a more professional audio track, multi-track mixer. But notice in here we still have the option to make a new drummer track, which is the same thing that we see in GarageBand, and that's very cool. But we also, in Logic, have all the other same stuff, not all of it, but a lot of the other same stuff that we had in Studio One, like the ability to use our plugins and blend the tracks together and edit the audio and do the fades and all that jazz. So this is Logic. It's very, very similar. It feels very Apple-y, and it has a lot of the same functions as GarageBand. And you can mix and match projects. You can send your GarageBand project to Logic and do some work on it, and then send it back, and that's all pretty cool. So this is Logic. Let's just take a look before I quit here at the MIDI. So let's grab software instrument track, I think. And then you can see down here we get a similar kind of MIDI roll. And I can draw stuff in here, theoretically. I think I might have to insert a MIDI region, create a MIDI region. And then I drag this out, and now I can draw in it, maybe. I don't know, it's not letting me draw. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, it wants me to actually play. All right, so let me try and record. All right, cool. Now you can kind of see how that works, and now we can edit this MIDI. We can move these notes around. We can change the length of them. We can update the velocity of them. So we have a featured MIDI editor here in Logic as well. Cool. Enough about Logic and GarageBand, because not everybody can use these. Again, you can only use these two tools specifically if you have a a Mac. If you have Windows, there's some other options though, so let's look at some of those. I installed some of them in a virtual machine here, so let's open up Windows, because we have the technology to do that. Firing up a Windows 10 box. Fire it up, fire it up. Doing its thing. Now, a lot of people talk to me about Audacity. Audacity is an audio editor. It's been around for a really long time. It's free. You can source. It does multi-track editing now. They've added multi-track editing to it. But Audacity, I know that people are going to yell at me about it in the comments because they always do. Audacity is not really a multi-track editor. I know that it does multi-tracks and you can edit those tracks, but it's not the same thing as these other DAWs. It was really designed to surgically edit a single audio file. And over time, people were like, well, we want to do multiple files. We want to do multiple files. So they figured out that they could do a stereo file and split that, and then they could have 2 mono files out of that one stereo file, and then they added on some multi-track stuff so you can do some multi-track editing, and that's all cool, but it's not going to be as full-featured like these programs that I'm showing you now, right? It's not the same thing. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at Cakewalk real quick by BandLab. So Cakewalk has a storied history. It's been around for a long, long time. Cakewalk came out. It was one of the dominant players in DAWs around the same time Pro Tools came out. Right, Pro Tools was in all the studios, and all the enthusiasts and stuff were using Cakewalk, and all the people that were into MIDI, because Cakewalk was really good at MIDI stuff, and Pro Tools wasn't at the time. So Cakewalk was very popular, and it had a hold on a big portion of the market for a long, long time. But back maybe, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, Cakewalk started struggling. They weren't keeping up with the innovation of all the other DAWs, and they got bought out by Gibson, who was also struggling, and they weren't keeping up with the innovation of all the guitar companies, and they were getting their hands in all sorts of weird stuff, and eventually they couldn't keep up with Cakewalk, and they killed it off entirely. So there were a lot of diehard fans that used Cakewalk, and they got kind of left out in the cold. But then recently, really recently, this company in Singapore called BandLab bought Cakewalk, and they've brought it back, and now they're releasing it to the public completely for free. This is the platinum version of what was called Sonar for a while. So this was a real formidable production studio that cost like $1,000 if you were to buy it, and they have taken it over, and they're developing it now, and they're giving it to people for free. So if you use Windows, this one's Windows only. If you use Windows, you can install this absolutely for free, and it's pretty great. So it comes with some templates here. We can have a basic one or a 4-track one, or whatever. So let's just grab the basic one. And this is Cakewalk. It looks like a DAW, like Studio One would look. And we can come in here. We've got our audio tracks. We've got a MIDI track. We can edit a piano. View the piano roll here. It's got what we would expect to have here for a piano roll, and we can draw in our notes or whatever. So this is very, very powerful, and I have access to all my plugins, and Cakewalk comes with its own plugins. Let's look at a couple of the Cakewalk plugins. So these are the ones that you can install now for free. Let's take a look at this audio file and see if I can, let's go up here, edit preferences maybe, see if we can get a recording thing working. Maybe not, because it's not even being presented to my virtual machine. Let's see up here, sound output, microphone. Let's do this. Let's try this. This is still working. Yeah. All right. Cool. So now now I have a signal here, and we can record into this track inside the virtual machine. I wouldn't recommend doing a production this way. That's not a efficient way, but whatever. So we're recording some audio here into this audio track. You can notice that it's a stereo track, and I'm only recording to one end of it because I only got one voice. So let's make a mono track, so we're only recording to one signal in the center, because this is just going to come from a speaker. Let's add another track here and see if we can make it a mono one. Insert audio track. It doesn't really ask, huh? TJ Maxx. I'm not super familiar with this. I haven't used it in probably 15 years, so I'm struggling to find where I set the stuff, like the input here. I'm not really sure. You'd have to come in here and learn the DAW, right? Because I don't know it well. But one of the points I'm trying to make is it does all the same stuff as Studio One. All that same stuff is in here. It's just called something. Oh, there it is. So now we can change what we've got here. We're recording stereo right now. Let's see if we just make it, what is it, the left one? Let's try that. Now we're recording left. So, nah, da 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 da. I don't want this to be a stereo track at all. Can I delete this? I'll delete this MIDI one too. Turn this one on. We're going to set it to not stereo. Start back at the beginning, and then we'll try to record our thing here and see what happens. I don't see anything happening here. That's too bad. Oh, but it kind of worked. It kind of did a thing, and it made it mono, so I'll take that. I'll take that. So this is Cakewalk, and it's a viable option if you want to do podcasts, because you can have 4 people record into separate tracks, and then you can do all the same kind of editing and cut out the ums and the blank space that you could in Studio One, but this is completely free, fully featured. So check out Cakewalk if you run Windows. Here's some of the other ones that you might come across. A while back, when I started playing with audio, there was a program called Fruity Loops. It was starting out, and it was for people that make like electronic music, dance music, and it's primarily based around a drum machine. So they had physical drum machines, like the 808 stuff, and pads, like these MPC devices that I have that have like the grid of pads on them. You can't really see it with the camera angle, but I got a bunch of them around here. So there were these hardware drum machine devices, and Fruity Loops kind of replicated that workflow for people to use computers instead. And now it's gone through 20 years of evolution, and they renamed it to FL Studio. It's still Fruity Loops, but they wanted a more serious name. And you can see we have a DAW here, but it's a bit different. It's set up kind of like a drum machine would be. So this is more like the piano roll. It's not a piano roll, but let's listen to the sound. Let's just... Is it going to work? Can I hear the sound? Play the sound. Boom, 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 boom. Will this play? Let's try it. Right, and now we can come in here and we can say boom, bop, boom, bop. And then we can fill in the hi-hats, and I just drag my mouse across, and now we're going to get the right, and let's add a random snare in here, just like right there. Right, and you could go through and create a whole drum track this way, and then we can add another track or another pattern in here with a different instrument and put in strings and violins, and then you have effects and a mixing window and all the same stuff that you would have like in Studio One, but you can tell that this particular DAW is really geared towards the electronic music producers and the DJs that are working with the drum machine style workflow. It's kind of iconic there, and it's used on real productions. Like, it's not a joke. It's a real DAW that is made to make real hit songs, and it's viable, right? And I think it's like $200, and it works on both Windows and Mac. So this is a cool option if you do this kind of music. I don't really do this kind of music much. I'm starting to. And Studio One also has a lot of the same kind of functionality. It's just not designed around it. Right? It's more of an afterthought in Studio One for someone like me than it is for someone that started producing electronic music that's moving into audio. Because you can record audio tracks into here too, but it's not really made for that, right? It's made for making beats. So that's FL Studio. Oh, I didn't mean to close that whole thing. Oops. Whoops-a-daisy. We're looking at the Windows DAWs now for a couple different reasons. One, because I want to demonstrate that they actually work on Windows, and two, because I didn't want to gum up my actual machine with all these DAWs. Every single one of them offers a pretty generous trial period if you're into one. And once you, like I said, once you learn one of the DAWs, you will, what's going on here? You'll kind of intuitively know how a lot of the other stuff works. I lost my mouse. What is happening? My machine's going crazy. Crazy. Here we go. Come on, Winders. All right. Let's take a look at Reaper. Now, Reaper's not a free option. It's been around for a long time, too. I used Reaper for many years, and I recommend it to people a lot of times. Now that Cakewalk is free, I might recommend Cakewalk over Reaper. I don't know. I haven't used Reaper for the last maybe 5, 8 years. But Reaper is very, very reasonably priced. They have a demo period that's like 90 days, and I think it never really truly expires. So you could always use the demo version. It's fully functioned, and they don't do weird stuff like cut out your audio every 15 seconds, right? They let you use it, but they kind of shame you. So I'll show you when we open up Reaper here. It's going to do its thing, and it says, hey, this isn't free software. You're still on the demo, and it makes me wait and look at this note that reminds me that, hey, somebody put work into this, and they need to get paid, and if you want it to continue to improve, then you got to pay us the money, right? So I can hit still evaluating here, and then I can still use this for as long as I want, right? The actual demo period, I think, is 90 days, but they're not going to cut it off after that. And you can upgrade to the next version, too, and do the same thing. Now, at $60, it's worth just buying. One, because that wait, and when you turn on the app, it actually is annoying. It does kill your workflow. It gets in the way. I want my stuff to be licensed. I want it to say my name on it when I turn it on. Say my name. Say my name, DAW. So let's come in here and insert a new track. And it looks very similar to all the other DAWs, right? And we can arm it for record here. Now we hear me with a delay. And here we have all our effects. Let me disarm that. Oh, there we go. I can hit. No. Let's just record a little piece. Oh, there we go. Now it's not doing it. Cool. I turned off the monitoring button. Now I don't hear that echo of myself. So let's record a little piece in here. We're recording a piece into Reaper. Reaper's not totally free, but it's very reasonably priced. It asked me if I want to save that file, which, yes, I do want to save that file. And now we have what you would expect from a DAW. You can see I've got my mixer section down here, and I can add a bunch of tracks here, and every track that I add gets a new channel here in the mixer, and I get the same kind of controls. I can mute, I can solo it, I can move the fader around, I can add my effects. Now, Reaper itself comes with some effects that are cool. They're not anywhere near as nice looking as all the other DAWs, because think about the price of this too, right? So they don't have the same development capacity as some of the big companies do, as Avid does for Pro Tools, as Apple does for Logic. Reaper's a much smaller company. So they have, let's take a look at their reverb. Let's grab Reaper Reverb. And here we go. So it's nothing that fancy, right? There's not a cool UI here. It's just a couple of sliders with some impulse responses, and we can pick in here Sweet Verbo, right? And it loads one of those impulse responses. It's a convolution verb, and you can download different impulse responses off the internet to load in here. And let's listen. We're recording a piece. Reaper. Reaper's not totally free, but it's very reasonably priced. So we got a reverb in here. Let's turn that off. And it comes with a compressor, so we can it splits it all up into categories, your plugins here. So let's look at the dynamics ones and grab the compressor. And we have, it's a compressor. It's not fancy looking, but it works. Works fine. You got the same meters. And we can pull our threshold down to somewhere like here, and let's grab our ratio and make that like 4, just to exaggerate it. We're recording a piece into Reaper. And now you got your gain reduction meter here, and you got your output here, and we can mix the wet and dry signals just like you would expect. It's just kind of ugly. So that's what you can expect for $60, right? But it's fully featured. It works well. It doesn't crash that much. It does crash sometimes. They all crash sometimes. This is very, very complicated stuff that we're doing. So this is Reaper. We can also add virtual instruments like in Studio One, and we can have our pianos, and we can have our synthesizers and all that jazz. We can have, I'm not sure how we insert MIDI here, but you can insert MIDI here. Maybe, wrong menu. Insert new MIDI item. There we go. So now if I open this up, we have our MIDI roll, but in Reaper, see, it's opening up in a separate window. And now I can come here and I can draw in my stuff. I don't have a sound loaded, so it's not playing any sounds. But it works the same way. It's almost the same thing. It doesn't have the cool drag and drop plugins that Studio One has. It doesn't have the same kind of modern UI and design and coherence that a lot of the other DAWs have, but works great. And you can use this for real productions if you want to. No, I don't think anybody would make fun of you for doing that. So this is Reaper. Doesn't cost much. It's cross-platform. It's a pretty good option. Now, this one's interesting. It's called Ardor, and it started out as an open source Linux project. Now, I'm a Linux guy, a computer nerd, and I used Linux for a long time before I was employed enough, I guess, making enough money to use a Mac at all, because I couldn't afford a Mac for a long time. So I used Linux instead, because I've always, since I was like 8 years old, loathed Microsoft. I still do. I hate Microsoft. So I used Linux when that was the option available to me. And this was the primary DAW option, which was strange, because Linux wasn't a thing that you used for audio production. It was more for like database. So this was really cool. And it was really nerdy. You had to do a bunch of tweaks and stuff to get it to even run. It was a multiple day project to make it work, but once it worked well. And now they've made it cross-platform. So we can start this up. And this is a open source DAW. You can go into Git and you can look at the actual code that they use to write this DAW. And we can come in here and it's very similar, right? If I right click, I can make all these different types of tracks. It's what you would expect to see from a DAW. So let's make an audio track here, and then we can arm that for record, and then we'll mute it because I don't want to hear it, and then we'll hit record, and then nope, that was the arm. Now we'll hit record, and now we'll record some audio into this thing. It's going to make me hit play, and there we go. We're recording audio into Ardor. This is another completely free and open source DAW. Actually, I don't know if I can say it's completely free. They do have a subscription model if you want to subscribe to this. I don't know if that is mandatory. I know that I subscribed to them back in the day when I was using this DAW because I wanted to support the development, especially development of a tool that I could use in Linux. So I didn't have to have a virtual machine, and I didn't have to have a second computer for my thing. I could just do what I needed to do. So now I can go into window here and say show the mixer, and now the mixer opens in another window, and it's a mixer like you'd expect to see. Oop. It's just split into two different windows. It's not docked in there. And we can add another track and we'll see it pop up in the mixer. So let's add another track. We'll record on this one, and then we'll come back here. We'll keep that other one muted so we don't have to listen to me. And then let's go. Now we're recording track 2. This should be popping up in the mixer. We see it here in the mixer. When we stop recording, hopefully we have audio there. Maybe I didn't set the input right. I don't know. We'll find out. Yeah, I guess I didn't set the input on the second track right. How do we do that? I'm not really sure because I don't use this one much. But we can. I know we can. Here. We must set it here. So input. Dun, 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 dun. What is going on? Audio 1. Inputs. It's using my microphone 2. There we go. There we go. Let's mute this. Alright, now let's do that again. I'm going to sing over that original one. Alright, cool. Groovy, so now we have both these tracks. Let's listen to that cacophony. I'm sure it's going to be great. Make me hit play. There we go. We're recording audio into Ardor. This is another completely... It sounds very, very, very terrible, but think about what I'm doing here. I'm actually recording this through a mic, through an interface, through a virtual machine, through a hypervisor that's looking at, you know, an emulated version of a computer. This is madness what I'm doing. So I don't expect this to play back cleanly. But it does. If you install this and use it, it will play back cleanly on your machine, on your native hardware, right? Keep that in mind for this demo. So that's Ardor. It's another option. It's pretty cool. I would use it. I did use it for a long time. I still have sessions that I created in Ardor that I can only read back in Ardor from a long, long time ago. All right, cool. So there's one more here in my virtual machine called Cubase. Cubase has been around for a long, long time. It's the inspiration for a lot of this innovation, I guess you would call it, in the industry. Studio One was designed by old Cubase designers. Cubase designed VST, the hot pluggable audio container there for our effects and stuff. So we have all these third-party companies making cool audio effects. We owe that to Steinberg. They make Cubase. They also make an iPad version of Cubase called Cubasis that my friend Crystal uses. This is telling me I'm on a demo version, which is true. I'm on a demo version. And let's take a look at Cubase. So here we have our startup page. They all kind of have their own take on a startup page. And it gives me some templates here. So let's say acoustic guitar and vocal. Boom. Create acoustic guitar and vocal. So in Cubase, it just generated those tracks for me automatically, so I don't have to add them. And then let's make this a little bigger so we can see what's going on. It's kind of similar to Studio One. I mean, it's darker. You can change the color, I think, to a point. But we have some tools here over on the left. We've got our EQs. We've got our inserts and sends like we would see on the channels of other DAWs. We've got another fader over here and some quick controls. I don't know what that's about. But same thing, same DAW. We can record into here. We have all the same tools up here. So we've got a blade tool and a draw tool and a glue tool to fix splits. You can do that in Studio One, but it doesn't have a specific tool for it. So Cubase is used a lot for audio production bands and stuff, and also for people that do like scoring, I guess. People that work with VSTs and virtual instruments a lot. Cubase is really good for those types of people. It's not super up to date. It doesn't have all the same features that some of the heavy development DAWs right now do. Like Studio One's pumping out tons of features because they have a lot of people working on it because it's popular right now. Cubase isn't as popular right now. They're not putting that same effort and investment into it. From what I can tell. I don't use this all the time. But here we have our virtual instruments. Looks like add track instrument. And then I can pick what kind of instrument. So you can see I can pick some from the other DAWs because they were VSTs, so they're hot pluggable. So I can pick some of the Fruity Loop stuff. I could pick this bass guitar one. Let's grab this bass guitar. It could be convincing, right? And then we can open up the MIDI editor and program a bass guitar part and use this virtual instrument in Cubase. So that's pretty cool. You can do it in a lot of the other DAWs. Cubase is particularly well suited to doing stuff like that, though. And it has a whole MIDI section. So if we had a MIDI track, call it chicken. Then I don't know if I have to insert. I'm not sure how to make the MIDI window come up in Cubase. I know it does. I've seen it before. Taking a look. Let's see what we can do if I right click on it. I don't know. If I grab the pen tool and do that. Now we have a thing. If I double click on that, I get my piano roll. Cool. So I had to create a little blank part here. And now I can open that up and I have the piano roll. Groovy. All right. So that's Cubase. It's very, very, very similar. Right? They're all very, very similar. Let's discard this. Don't save it. Shut it up. And let's kill this virtual machine. We don't need Windows anymore. It's just being weird. So these are all options that you can use on Windows. You can use Studio One on Windows. You can use Pro Tools on both. A lot of them are both. The only one that's Windows only on here is Cakewalk, and that's also free. So if you use Windows, that's a good option for you. Now let's pop back to my Mac. I'll get rid of this VM because that's super annoying, and I don't want to hear about this. All right, cool. So now we're back on my Mac. Let's take a look at Audacity. We mentioned Audacity and how I don't love it as a multi-track editor, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a good purpose, because it totally does. So this is Audacity. This is a free tool. It's open source. You can download it and use it for recording stuff or editing. And you have a lot of, like, if we opened up Studio One and you see you got your arranger window in the top, and then the bottom is that little editor tool where you could work on a single waveform. That's what we have here primarily. Now, like I said, they have added multi-tracking here, so you can do kind of a basic multi-track kind of thing. But I would think of that more as like an 8-track, like an old 4-track cassette recorder type thing. You can do it, and there's some functions there, but it's not the same as a modern DAW. It's just not. I'm sure people are going to argue with me about that. But now we can come in here and do edits to our audio. We can zoom in on it with the zoom tool. Bum, 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 bum. We have a whole bunch of different envelope tools, so we can change, the volume of it, or we could change the pitch. We can do all sorts of weird stuff here, right? And fix or manipulate our audio sources. So this is good if you're doing like voiceover work. Maybe if you're putting together a slideshow and you want to narrate it, you might come in here and do some cleanup. Excuse me. We can use our VST plugins in here to do things like add reverb and whatnot. And we can add more tracks, I'm sure. So let's take a look at adding more tracks. So let's add one more mono track. Here we go. Let's mute this one. I don't know how to arm and disarm it, though, like I would in a normal DAW. So I'm not sure what makes it record to this track as opposed to the other track. Let's see. Now, let's see. I think now, because I have this track selected, I'm pretty sure this is the one that's getting recorded to, which is kind of weird. I'm not positive that's how Audacity works with the multi-tracking, but this is strange behavior to me. There's no arm and disarm the track. We're not recording both at the same time. Let's zoom out and see what just happened. What did just happen? Yeah. So we recorded a totally separate track just by being on that track, right? If I had selected this track instead, I would have recorded over that. That's a strange way for it to work, right? But whatever, that is how it works, and it is very useful because you can come in here and fix volume problems. You can come in here and get rid of clicks and pops or add them if you're trying to like simulate the vinyl sound on a song or something, and you have a lot of control here. Also notice I can use like my preferred EQ on this if I want to pull that up. That's very cool to be able to do because I love this EQ. That's Audacity. It's primarily suited for working on one track at a time, editing. You can do multi-track editing in it. I wouldn't recommend it. If you're on the no budget thing, I would say use Cakewalk over this for that kind of workflow. But if you're just doing a podcast or something, even if you're doing a podcast, use something else. Right? Don't use Audacity for that. Use this for like forensics. If you're trying to discern what he said in a telephone call because it's evidence in a court case, you could use this, right? It's not super musical. There used to be I'm sure it still exists. There was another tool just like this created by Steinberg, the same people that made Cubase, and it's called Wavelab, and it was used more in mastering. So mastering is a pretty good application of a tool like this, where you're working on one track at a time. what else we got? Another one that's very popular that we haven't really I don't use much. It's called Ableton Live, and that one is geared more towards people that are doing DJ type stuff and live performance. So it's set up so that it's super visual, right? So you can see what's going on if you're on a dark stage and you're trying to control a bunch of faders and stuff. Let's open up Ableton and take a look at that. So it's super powerful. It's been around a long time, and you can do all the basic DAW stuff with it, but it's really geared around that whole live performance kind of Nine Inch Nails, Trent Reznor, Skrillex kind of, I don't know, Deadmau5, I guess. So here we go. We've got Ableton, and we've got all our effects and stuff here. MIDI, audio. We've got some tracks. Let's see what's going on. Let's do a new live set. So here's a new live set, and here's our MIDI track. And we can insert new tracks. Let's grab a virtual instrument or something. So I click on instruments. Let's go to an electric bass. Let's grab this wobble bass and pull it over here and see what happens. Cool. So it plays the wobble bass, right? Now if I hit record, I should be able to record that. Now, let's take a look at where the actual arranger view, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. So if I change the view now, I can see kind of my timeline, and we can see the MIDI that I played with my keyboard, and our tracks are on the opposite side, which is weird to me, but I'm sure they did it for a very good reason, for the purposes of the people that are using this for live performances. They make stuff very big, very easy to see. It comes with different samplers and effects that you can use, and it's really really well suited to being controlled by things like keyboards or machine pads or sliders and faders, knobs and turny things, right? All that fun stuff that DJs love. This is Ableton Live. I don't use it a lot. It's very powerful and people love it. And it can record audio and do very good MIDI stuff, and it has the sequencing built in, and it's primarily for live performances. That's why they call it Ableton Live. Now, in Studio One, they just came out with a new version like 2 days ago that I did not install because I know better than to install a major version 2 days before a demo. But that new version of Studio One version 5, is primarily geared towards this Ableton. So they're adding all these sorts of live performance features now to try and come after Ableton's market share. And that's interesting. I don't use those features, so I'm not super excited about it, but it'll probably be cool when I see people do cool stuff with it, and then I'll be like, whoa, how do you do that? So that's cool. This is Ableton. Now, there's another interesting one that is pretty new, and it's geared towards people that are creating, like sound design people and people that do ambient music and techno type music. Bitwig Studio. So let's take a look at Bitwig Studio. This is very virtual instrument heavy and sequencer based. So we're in demo mode here. It's gaining a lot of popularity now. People like it. It looks very modern. We open up and it asks for what template we want to do. We could use either piano keys or play drums, and it gives us drum machine sounds. Let's see what drums does. Let's open up drums. It's going to download stuff. Well, let's hope that this... it's downloading quickly. It shouldn't be a problem. So we're opening up play drums, and let's see how that works here in Bitwig. Bitwig's kind of expensive, too, especially being the new kid on the block. It's not super time tested. It's kind of neat. It's a different approach, but I think it was like $200 to $300 or something like that. I was surprised at the cost of this one. It looks cool. All right, so now we have classic drums. What's going on with the classic drums? It's broken into scenes here, which is similar to how I break these kind of workshops up into different scenes. I imagine that means a lot more to somebody that's live on stage trying to do something with tons of mics and lights and fog machines and control it all from one place. I don't really know how to use this though, so it's interesting. I'm trying to figure out how to program some drums. I double click here, and there we go. We get our drum roll. So it's similar to the piano roll, except instead of seeing all the keys on the piano, it's showing me what all the drums are. So that's cool. Let's start putting in some kicks. Boom. Let's zoom out some. Boom. Hey, where are we? Why isn't that playing? Oh, because I hit record. I don't know. I'm not clear on why it's not playing back. But whatever. It plays when I hit them. And that's pretty cool. And we can set up a scene, and now we can add some stuff in there. So this is a sequence inside that scene, and we can build this out so that we can kind of on the fly build a performance. So you could do a verse, and then you could freestyle something over that verse while it's playing, and you can keep adding that verse while you're doing your freestyle, and then only when you're ready to move on to the chorus, then you move on to your next scene, which might be the chorus, right? So it's a pattern generating system here in Bitwig. And you can change all the colors and stuff, so that's very simple to see if you're doing it live. And it makes it easy to map all the functionality to all the different little controllers that you might have on your DJ console. Now, this is it's a good portion of some of the more popular digital audio workstations that are out there, and why you might want to use some of them over the others. I like Studio One because I think it's a great mix of all the other things, but it does the things that I do most well, and I know how to do it quickly in Studio One. I wanted to also very, very quickly, we got about 8 minutes left. Let's take a quick look at a video editor just so we can see the similarity there. So let's open up Final Cut. This is Apple's video editor, and I'll also show you Adobe Premiere. So if you just Final Cut, it's firing up, it's doing its thing, firing off a bunch of windows. Both of these tools do the same, they can perform the same function, right? And there are fans of either one of the systems, and you can do a Hollywood film on either one if you wanted to. It largely comes down to personal preference and who you're working with and what they expect to see as far as standards go. So Final Cut's still doing its thing here. Let's try and open up Premiere at the same time because we're living on the edge and we're running out of time. We're living on the edge. We're running out of time. Open up Premiere. Let's see who wins. I did hit Final Cut a significant while ago. So far, I've got more feedback from Adobe. Adobe's winning. Adobe's winning. Who's going to win? I'm not particularly impressed with either. Well, let's kill my virtual machine here, too. That's probably eating up some resources. Let's kill Audacity. So now, if you learn any one of these DAWs with any sort of, I don't know, depth, right? If you get proficient at any single one of them, you can move on to the other and learn that fairly quickly. But to that end, they also allow you to change a lot of the shortcuts between these apps. So if you're used to Adobe Premiere, for example, and you know all the shortcuts well, and you switch over to Final Cut, you can change all the shortcuts so that they're what you're used to, and they do the same thing. And you can do the same thing in a lot of the DAWs too. So people that use Pro Tools on a film all day, every day, really know all those key commands very well. And if they move on to another system, they can continue using their workflows and optimizations because you can change the keyboard shortcuts. So here we go. We have, what is this, Final Cut? So let's import some media. I've got this thing, the Blackstone Valley Bluegrass insert from import media. Come on. from Valleycast's concert series. So we import this media, and we can see we've got our timeline. We've got not a timeline, but this is an overview of the performance. Now I can hit new project, we'll make up a new project, and I can drag this into my timeline. This is the timeline, and this performs in the same way as our Digital Audio Workstation does, except that it's tied to the video. So we can add another audio track here, for example. Let's open up, do I have an audio track somewhere? I must. Let's open up my Finder. We've got 4 minutes, and then we're going to find an MP3 or something that I definitely have in my downloads somewheres. There's one. So we're going to grab this and drag it in too, right? And now we have the video and we have the audio, and we can move the audio around so that it's super loud, but we can move the audio around so that it fits the video, and we can do our cuts. I don't want this to keep playing on you, so I'm going to stop doing that. But we can make our cuts here, and we can move stuff around and do our fades, and we can use all those same plugins that we used in the DAW, and we can do some fancy stuff. And now one reason, did Premiere ever open here? I teased it so much, so we might go over for 1 second, but I'm going to show you this one thing. Let's start a new project here in Adobe Premiere. Adobe Premiere. And let's open up Adobe Audition. So I teased this the whole time, and then I forgot to even show it. Adobe Audition. So Adobe has a whole creative suite of tools, and they have Premiere for video, and they have Audition for audio, and they have Photoshop for photos, and they have InDesign for designing. But they have their own DAW, and this is it. And let's go up to File, New, Multi-Track Session. So we're creating a new multi-track session here, and this looks just like any other DAW. It's Adobe's DAW. Let's grab that song that I found here and drag it in to one of these tracks. Cool. So now we have our track here. But check this out, because this is super cool for video people. Adobe Audition has this function here. If we hit Enable Remix, check it out. It starts analyzing this song. So it's looking at all the transients, and it's looking at what's going on in the song. And now it gives us the availability. Now we can take, this is the duration of the song by default. It's 2 minutes and 49 seconds. But let's say our video is only 1 minute and 30 seconds. Now we can come in here and we can say, I need this to be 1 minute and 30 seconds, right? And check it out. It does a thing, right? It took a second there. It was pretty fast because this is relatively short. Let me zoom this out, and you can see that it's 1 minute and 30 seconds now, and you can see this little squiggly line. Now you can see a squiggly line through the audio. Now I'm going to play this back, and you'll hear that it seamlessly found a place to cut the audio, and it stitched it back together in a way to make this song sound like it was only 1 minute and 30 seconds so that it can fit my video perfectly. So let's just listen back to this, and then we'll head out. And it's been cool hanging out with you again on Saturday, and I'll talk to you again next week. Check out Laura too after this great song from Epidemic Sound.
not here.